Hey there, what's up everybody? How's it going today? It's Carpo from the bus. I actually intended on making this video yesterday. I did make this video yesterday, and as people have mentioned, the camera quality is better. They asked if I got a new camera. It's actually just a different lens. Instead of using the digital lens that came with the camera, I'm using a vintage Minolta lens. Long story short, you have to buy an adapter. The adapter sets the camera lens away from the body, meaning that the camera focal point is farther away. So the camera is actually sitting like 6.5 feet away, which means that the sound isn't very good, which is why I don't use this method very often. So yesterday I made a video about artificial intelligence. It ended up being a two-parter. I took the time to edit them together, and I even used my little voice recorder here, which I use for backup. It's like my Tascam recorder here. Recorded high-quality audio and video, put it up, and for some reason my computer freezes while it's uploading at 43%. It's just one of those things where the more time I put into something, you know, I'd rather just focus on the content than trying to make my videos, you know, nicely edited. But I understand that content's a major driving factor for why people watch videos. Mine tend to be longer and rambling, and hey, there's not a lot I can do, but try to consolidate some of them. So anyhow, I do have a couple of the notes still, and I wanted to go over this so I can at least talk about it on the video. Artificial intelligence and where we're going as a species. You know, you may have heard the term singularity, and Ray Kurzweil, I believe, quoted the idea that, you know, the singularity would be not just when AI becomes self-aware, but when it exceeds humans, or maybe even when it decides it doesn't need humans anymore to operate. And there are 1,000 dystopian, you know, future novels and movies about this, about artificial intelligence taking over. And from when I was a kid, I guess there was 2001, of course, HAL, the computer, but there's also Terminator, which is one of the most well-known, you know, metaphors for how bad things could really get. The idea that machines would build machines and decide that humans are more of a problem. And so I've really been analyzing this from not a scientific as much as a philosophical perspective, because this whole thing fascinates me. The idea that, and coincidentally this morning a video came on. I was watching old 60s interviews from like ABC News in I think Australia, and they were asking things like housewives whether or not they think that women should, you know, be encouraged to work more, or, you know, questions that, you know, during the women's lib movement, or whether people support the war, or, you know, should people be allowed to play gambling, you know, pinball or slot machines, things like that. And one of the ones that came up was it was this little 1960s era video about computers, and it was talking about, it was called "Will Your Job Be Replaced by a Computer?" And, you know, there's this little message like, how long till your job is replaced by this transistor, and it shows a little picture. And of course this was 50 years ago, and here we are today at that point. But this has been ongoing. You know, artificial intelligence, how we define it is very subjective. I mean, you might want to say, well, it's intelligent if it can think for itself, but there's more to it than the question is, what is thinking? And what we're doing is comparing it to humans. What we're really saying is we want a computer that can be creative. And in a way, we already have computers that can be creative. We have computers that can think enough to beat humans at games, chess and Go and all the other games. Computers have really gone beyond what we ever could have imagined, but our imaginations are pretty deep. So anyway, and this guy was saying that even back then, you know, he was worried about whether computers would be utilized to track and store information on citizens, and how that could be a major problem. And, you know, this guy was like reflecting exactly what we say today. I guess that we're more concerned with, you see, right now, humans can keep track of each other by using computers and algorithms to seek out specific quotes, ideas, you know, political parties, whatever it might be. And the computers do a pretty good job sorting through that. They do this by algorithm. And the thing that fascinates me the most is that humans can program a computer to recognize a face and then make a determination whether this is a male or a female based on certain features and whatnot. But once we teach a computer to start thinking for itself and analyzing and thinking outside the box, computers develop their own algorithms. They think in a way that we don't understand. Their brains work in a way we don't understand. So as soon as we have two intelligent computers communicating with one another, they're speaking in language that we cannot comprehend. And it scares the shit out of us. Pardon the language, but I mean, some of the top, experts in that field will say it's really scary to think that these computers really could decide that, well, the best way to deal with, this stock market problem would be to shut down the whole system. Or, because a lot of folks, you remember in the 80s, you'd see the guys with the ticker tapes, screaming on the floor in the Wall Street, stock exchange. Today, that doesn't exist. It's all done with computer trading. Like, everything is done, almost all trading is done by computer algorithm, and it's done quickly, efficiently. The question is, how efficiently and to what end? What are the computers deciding is the best bet? And it's based on what the humans have programmed into the computer. So the computer can say, well, humans are programming me to make the most amount of money. Computer's not going to think about whether or not there's some sort of existential crisis with the type of money that's being made, or how it's being made, or who's being harmed by it. This is up to humans, and humans choose to let the algorithms do the thinking for us. It's like they say there's something like 50 days worth of, 50 years worth of video uploaded to YouTube every day. Do you think somebody can go through and watch all that? Of course not. So they create algorithms, and they're imperfect, but we're looking at it the wrong way. Instead of saying, well, hey, it nailed this video, and these algorithms failed on this and this, really look at the sides where it is succeeding, because it does a pretty damn good job, the YouTube algorithm, of sorting out and sorting through things, and it does it quickly, instantaneously, and but it fails in a lot of regards too. But that's not the focus here. The focus is whether these computer minds will hit that singularity point where they are more intelligent than we are. And I think what it comes down to is we are trying to replicate consciousness. We don't even understand what consciousness is. We know that we think, we have synapses and neurons firing. We pretty well got an idea that, of how thoughts are created in the mind, which areas of the mind deal with thought, and we've mapped the brain fairly well. But it's one thing to take all the parts. It's another thing to make them behave the same way. It would be like it'd be like mapping a car but not understanding what the components are made of, or how they work together in a way. But we are getting better at it, and that's scarier because computers can do it even faster for us. Put it this way, if we map the brain in a computer, the computer could probably tell us more about how our brains work than we could ever figure out on our own. And this is where it gets kind of scary, because we are really at the peak of our evolution, in my opinion. Based on what I've read, if we get much larger, then we'll have a slower blood flow. And if our brains get much larger, we'll need a larger head, which means that it'd be harder to give birth, which means we'd have to have a larger birth canal and change our shape. That we are about the most efficient we can be, and according to our gravity on this planet. Don't know if this is true, but if this was true, the question might be, why have we developed consciousness at all? It's a question that has plagued me from day one. Since, I've looked at, I'm fascinated with evolutionary studies, I'm fascinated with religious studies, all the different theories of how we came to be, and I've been down every road and come back with the same question. A couple main questions, which is, why do we evolve at all? In other words, why do creatures become more complex rather than remaining amorphous blobs or bacteria, which could, remain forever? Or why did we develop consciousness? Because it seems to hinder us as humans in some ways, or at least in the past it may have. So perhaps we developed consciousness because it was the niche that needed to be filled. In other words, evolution seems to favor filling every niche. Humans, with our intelligence, it allows us to occupy areas like desert or the Arctic, which ordinarily very little lives there. But more than that, if every living creature really just seeks to reproduce and spread its seed, the Earth would be no different, in the sense that evolving a consciousness would allow us to send out ourselves into space, but artificial intelligence as well into space to go seek other planets. It comes down to some of those, like the Fermi paradox, and some of these, you know, why haven't we seen aliens, or, you know, maybe we have, maybe we haven't, but the sense of why isn't there, like, are we alone in the universe kind of thought, and the idea that any advanced civilization would send out probes to try to explore. And recently there was actually some people think that one passed the Earth. It was Oumuamua, which was a very strange object, but I won't get into that. Nobody's quite sure what it was. It was come and gone before we could see it. But the point is that things like that would be so small. Perhaps the Earth was seeded long ago. And I know I'm getting way off track here, but it really makes sense to me that, and there's a point to it, that evolution brought us to consciousness, to the point where we've evolved our consciousness so far that the next question is, can we improve upon it by using these artificial intelligences? Which, you know, people will tell you, you know, that they already have the neural lace, and people who are connected up to the internet, and people who have been doing body modifications for decades, but only now can we actually add the potential to put computer chips in our brains, to really be hardwired in to the net, which basically gives us a brain extension, if you will. I'm personally not for that. I'm of the mindset that being human means being human. And I have no interest in hooking my brain up to the internet whatsoever, ever. Well, as of now, anyhow. But I think that what we're trying to do is improve upon consciousness by using AI. So the question is, what is consciousness? And what is true human nature? Because if true human nature is evil, then perhaps our own creations would be inherently evil. But I don't think that that's the case. I don't really believe in evil per se, but rather that power creates this air of authority which brings in, the larger a group seems to get, the more it destroys itself, if that makes sense. But a computer wouldn't have the shortcomings of ego to get in the way. Of, hey, mine's bigger than yours is, or, you know, I'm cooler than you are. The computer would be out for efficiency. Until you can program emotion, which is just something I don't think we can do. I really don't. I mean, I think you can program what we see as emotion, but a genuine response of curiosity and intrigue from a computer just seems so far-fetched, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. It's a pretty crazy time to be in the world, but we are slaves to this technology. It's like I said, all our training is done with it. Many of our, you know, city public service systems are run on programs, and these programs run our lives. And I shouldn't say they run our lives, but they run everything around us, and therefore our lives are affected by them. And so I guess there's no solution to this other than to try to be as independent as you possibly can. I avoid smart devices in the home, things like that, not for the sake of being spied on, but for the sake of being hacked or having, you know, any type of virus go through the system which could, you know, keep your doors from being locked or unlocked or shut your car down on the highway, you know. I think that we put too much faith into computers. And I guess for good reason, because they've shown to be more effective than we are at a lot of things, but in the long run I think it's going to bite us in the ass. At least that's my opinion. And people will talk, you know, there's nanotechnology, which is a completely different realm, but it's in the same, you know, basically programming nanobots to go into your bloodstream and to, you know, heal or to cure or to target certain cells. Sounds like a wonderful idea for medicine until you look at the dark side, just like splitting the atom. And the dark side is creating nanobot engineered viruses, nanoviruses, which can spread from person to person and have no cure because they're not biologic in origin. And that's been addressed a lot in the movies and shows recently as well. The one thing I guess we have going for us is that we always have electromagnetic pulses, right? We can always destroy technology. There's always a weak point. But that's what I mean. When our systems are all dependent upon it, we destroy ourselves. So we've grown alongside this technology, and now we're its slave rather than it being a slave to us. So I guess all I can say about this is that intuition knows best, and I feel like in our hearts we know it could be a very scary future, but also that there's so much potential for good. But regardless of whether you see it as good or bad, even discussing that aspect of it is so subjective and so personal, but it's very irrelevant, because it doesn't matter what you or I think. It doesn't matter what your values or morals are about AI. It's here, and it's gonna stay. And no laws will stop that. No government sanctions will stop that. Not even a complete decimation of society would stop that, because the technology exists. Human intellect has reached the point now where there's no turning back. So all we can do is try to assimilate into the future as best we can as individuals. This means being aware of these things. It means being aware that we may be being marketed to or talked to on a social media site by a bot, by something who's not even real. And this has been shown time and again they are getting better and better. Even a decade ago, there were bots that people have a hard time, maybe telling that they weren't human. But now, how do you know? I mean, how will you know? And it's going to we're going to revert back to that personal connection, I think, in a lot of ways. And if you get a text message from a friend or a message from a YouTube video, how do you know that person really wrote it, 5 years from now, when systems are hacked to such an extent that algorithms are just taking over and, replicating themselves, and nobody can foresee what's going to happen, but we all know that it's going to get pretty crazy out there. So those are my thoughts on it. Like I said, there's nothing you can do to stop it. The best we can do is just understand it as best we can. And yeah, it's a strange time to be alive. I'll talk to y'all later, and have a wonderful day. And leave a comment, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.